The views expressed on this program are those of the producers and individuals appearing on this program and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Sun Prairie Media Center staff, its video service providers, or the staff and elected officials of the City of Sun Prairie.
Hello and welcome to Real Reviews. My name is Jameson Rabbit, and I am joined once again by my friend in the van. His name is Jason Spencer. Sir, how are you?
I am doing just fine.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you back. How are things going in Oklahoma these days?
It's nice and cloudy today, actually. A little bit of rain this afternoon. It has cooled down tremendously. But I'm ready to talk about movies, sir.
That's exactly why I brought you on. That kind of attitude, ready to talk about some flicks. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started with what we have on the marquee this week. First, we're going to start with Stillwater. Stillwater, the newest film from director Tom McCarthy. Right away, I went into this thinking it was a documentary about the band Stillwater from Almost Famous. You know, Jason Lee out there doing some Fever Dog.
No.
Wasn't it? No.
No.
All right. This is a movie that's based loosely on the events of Amanda Knox, an American student who is arrested and sent to prison overseas. It's loosely based on her story. It's about an American college student. In this film, her name is Allison, played by Abigail Breslin, who's living overseas. She's been found guilty of murdering her girlfriend. Her father is played by Matt Damon. He's a man named Bill Baker. He is a man who's a roughneck from your parts down in Oklahoma.
Only a couple hours away.
Stillwater, right down the road. He's struggling to make ends meet, but he's constantly going to visit his daughter. At this point, she's been sitting in prison for 5 years, and we see that he's constantly making treks to France to visit her and do what he can. Neither one of these people are really giving up on her case, trying to get it overturned by finding the real killer, even when no one else is willing to help them or even maybe believes in them. And so he decides to take matters into his own hands in a foreign land. He enlists the help of a single mom that he met in his hotel, and he uses her as his translator because he don't speak that French. She kind of quickly goes from basically kind of helping him out of pity. We see a friend of hers like, oh boy, you're always taking on these charity cases for people, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty soon kind of takes him in to live with her and her daughter Maya. It's a story of him, a man in a foreign land, trying to track down the truth while also being making a lot of really horrible mistakes along the way, kind of hamstringing himself. But he never gives up. Bill Baker never gives up, and throughout the way he bonds with little Maya in both French and in English. It's kind of fun watching them kind of teach each other. But we see that he has a really fractured relationship with basically everyone else in his life, and that kind of seems to carry on for this story. I'm curious your thoughts on Stillwater as a story.
I enjoyed the movie enough. It wasn't doing anything new really, other than the fact that I think at least some people in the theater that I went to thought this was going to be more Taken kind of film.
Sure.
It is not an action film. It is definitely a character study in a man who is from a small town in middle America, who works with his hands, whose education is probably limited, and he's put in a situation that is unfathomable. When you really think about it, his daughter's locked up in a foreign country. He has to travel to that foreign country with no real idea how to speak the language, what the customs and culture is like. And he really kind of finds himself in this movie and in this story. And again, you say, his relationships with people are fractured. And even when it's going good, even when he's cleared that hurdle of having just rough relationships with people, he tends to shoot himself in the foot in that regard. But again, it's not an action film. It's a study about this man who cares for his daughter and really is doing his best. And sometimes his best just isn't enough.
Yeah, I felt like I was supposed to really be rooting for Matt Damon's character because, he's a likable guy like Matt Damon, and he seems like a a guy that I work with. You know, this fella doesn't seem too far off from guys I know, but I kind of found at the end of the movie that I found the character of Bill Baker to be kind of unlikable, and that I felt like he put others in danger too often. And as much as he wanted to help, that I felt like he's a guy who never keeps his promises, and that catches up with him pretty frequently, even towards the end. Like, he's doing things to put other people in danger to serve one goal, and he knows that there's a truth about his daughter that he doesn't want to face, and he's willing to put other people in jeopardy to try and still fix things with his daughter. I don't know. I felt like he was a little two-faced in portions, and it was kind of frustrating to me, because I did enjoy him in this, but I just thought that kind of Bill Baker was kind of a not a trustworthy guy.
I think I liked him a little bit more than you did. I was rooting for him because in part of the movie, he seems to have turned a corner. He seems to have gotten things on track.
Right.
And I was like, oh, good, because he hasn't been doing well up to this point, and the history we've learned about him hasn't been stellar. Good. I'm glad he's doing better. But then he makes that choice, a decision. He makes that turn in the road that puts him right back in the path that he was on before, and that kind of bummed me out a little bit. But I genuinely liked his journey for the most part. I like where we end with the character. And because of that, I gave the movie 2.5 stars. I put it right in the middle, because while there were a lot of things I liked about it, I liked Ben Affleck's performance. I thought he did really well.
How about Matt Damon?
Ben Affleck did a better job. Yeah, no, Matt Damon did okay too. I liked him, and I think really he was the heavy lifter out of the entire cast. But it was really kind of hard to separate Matt Damon from Matt Damon, if you will. It was like, oh, it's Matt Damon playing a Okie. Like, it was maybe he's too big of an actor to have played such a small kind of intimate role. I don't know. And then there were just a couple story beats that you know, just fell a little flat for me.
I found at one point in the movie that I feel like it was a little lengthy. Like, at one point I was checking my watch. I don't even wear a watch, but I was checking for it because I'm like, all right. And I felt like it kind of spun into this kind of implausible Hollywood turn towards the end that I wasn't buying. And Abigail Breslin, who we haven't seen a lot from, you know, she was in the recent Zombieland sequel, but outside of that, haven't seen a lot of her in recent years. I thought she was kind of one note in this movie. I thought that she didn't bring a ton to the part. I was watching and thinking, like, boy, I got a list of actresses that really could have brought some real depth to this character, and I didn't think that she brought that.
Yeah, and I agree. And you bring up Zombieland, the Zombieland sequel. I felt the same thing about her in that one, that she showed up. She showed up to collect her paycheck, and I felt the same way in this one. Matt Damon, also known as Ben Affleck in some circles. I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah,
he was bringing a really solid game to this film, and she was not matching that. And when she's supposed to be the reason for his character's motivation, I wasn't seeing that on her end of the film, to the point where I didn't really like her. Like, I didn't like her character. I didn't care whether or not she got out of prison or not.
Hey, go ahead and sit and rot. I don't care.
Yeah.
Just because you're American,
because you're kind of a turd. But ultimately, I absolutely agree with you.
And I agree with you. Actually, I end up giving it 2.5 out of 5 stars as well. I think it's right down the middle. Very, very meh movie. No need to rush out to check it out. But let's move on to what else we have on the marquee this week, sir. What do you have for us?
Well, we have Disney coming in and creating another film out of one of their theme park rides. Worked so well with them for Pirates of the Caribbean, as we know.
And Haunted Mansion.
Yeah, and I was going to say, and that movie is the Haunted Mansion. No, it's not the Haunted Mansion. It's a movie about a boat traveling a certain part of the world. Yes, it's the Small World film you've been waiting for. No, which confused me for the first 30 minutes. I'm like,
Sure,
where's all the
sure.
singing kids? I don't get this direction you went. And then someone was like, no, it's a Jungle Cruise. And I was like, oh,
Understandable.
well, this makes way more sense. We have The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, playing the skipper, who is taking Emily Blunt and her brother down the rivers to basically find an herb, a flower that is reported to be able to heal any ailment and break any curse.
Mhm.
And so she wants to find this to help better the world. Part of that having to be with, like, we're in the middle of a world war, and the Germans are looking for this plant as well, because they figure if they find this plant that can basically grant immortality, that will be great for their fighting army that they have currently. Like, and it makes sense. Ultimately, what we have is something akin to a Pirates of the Caribbean / Indiana Jones / the African Queen, mostly the Mummy type mashup
exactly.
of a film.
You're exactly right.
And I mean, if you liked any of those things I just said, you will like this movie too. It is a film that is meant to be nothing but a fun adventure. And when you have The Rock, I hold solid to the fact that The Rock is a genuinely talented entertainer.
Yeah.
He is an entertainer of the highest degree, and that is what he is meant to be. The downside of this movie, I think the only weak part of this film, is that there is a moment where his character, The Rock's character, has to kind of bare his soul, has to be he has to be an emotional person, and I don't buy it. The Rock cannot do, for me, an emotional delivery of lines. He's there to jump from building to building, to lift heavy things.
He's pure charisma.
Yeah, and he's just an entertaining dude. Is he a great actor, though? Is he a thespian? I don't think so, but I don't expect that from him.
Right.
I don't demand that he get better. Like, what I want to see The Rock do is take me on an adventure. That's what this movie delivers. Emily Blunt, she is a great foil to him in terms of matching his charisma on screen, and her character just works really well with his character. I found this movie to be very, very fun. Again, like I said, if you like The Mummy, if you like Pirates of the Caribbean, you're going to dig this one. I had high hopes for the Jungle Cruise movie because I really liked the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. You know, depending on which one you're talking about.
Yeah.
The first one, A+. They took the idea of one of their theme park rides and they put it on the screen, and it was very magical, and it really did something cool with that property. Like we said before, Haunted Mansion, it didn't work out so well. They're actually trying to do Haunted Mansion again, so let's hope second time's a charm. But the Jungle Cruise seems like it's a no-brainer in terms of the theme park ride to film recipe that Disney has, and that's exactly what I saw on screen.
Yeah, it's tons of fun. It's a solid popcorn flick, a great fun family adventure. All the movies you mentioned, I had written down as well because it feels like those. And that's fun. I brought my 8-year-old daughter. She was loving it. You know, it gets a little dark in the third act, for a minute, but it's a fun adventure flick. It's actually better than it deserves to be, I think. I think it's a lot of fun. It's a type of film that we don't get enough of these days. I feel like we had a lot of these in previous generations of these big, fun, crazy adventures. And I really enjoyed it. I think that Emily Blunt's character is great as the Indiana Jones type, as the female hero who kind of pushes the Rock around, and has her brother who's more the prim and proper dandy, who she pushes him around too, and she's the one who gets things going. And let's talk about Jesse Plemons for a minute. He shows up as the German foil with his over the top accent, and I feel like he seems to really enjoy taking on these weird roles, and he seemed like he was loving this character, just popping in everyone's like, hello,
he plays a great villain, a likable villain. Not that,
he's literally a mustache twirling villain.
Oh yeah. And when I say he's a likable villain, it's not that he is a likable person. It is that he is fun to watch on screen. And again, along with Emily Blunt kind of matching the level of what The Rock is bringing, he brings that same amount of ridiculous energy to his character as well. There isn't one person on screen that I was like, you probably didn't need this character, or this could have been cast better. They were all cast great. Paul Giamatti pops up in a very small role.
He's great.
But he's great in it, you know? Yep. Everything worked really well with this movie. The only problem I really had was just the moment of sincerity that Dwayne Johnson needs to bring in one moment, that it just doesn't hit well for me. Not that it's bad, but again, you know where The Rock, where his ceiling is, and it just that scene kind of stepped over it a little bit. And I've seen that in a couple of his movies, but it's a completely forgivable thing, because that's not what we're here for. We're here for the adventure, and this movie delivers that in spades.
You're absolutely right. What did you end up giving Jungle Cruise?
I gave it 3 stars. The reason it's a little lower than I think you would expect, given the glowing review I just gave it, was one of the things that I wish it had better is the music. When I think of Pirates of the Caribbean, like the theme, the music of that movie really adds to the magic of that film. This movie didn't have that. It had music that helped propel the action and all that kind of stuff, but it didn't have anything memorable that struck out, that stuck out to me as like, I'm going to be humming this on the way home, or I want to buy that soundtrack.
You need Randy Newman soundtrack. That's what you need.
I need something that's gonna have that Indiana Jones theme to it, have that thing. And I didn't really get that from the soundtrack of this film. If it had, I could easily see this being like 3.5, maybe almost 4 stars, because it was that much fun.
Yeah, that's fair. I end up giving it 3.5 out of 5. Really fun. It's great anytime you can find one of these movies that you can take the entire family to, and nobody's like, boring, it's a kids movie. Yeah, so I'm all on board when you can get one of these, and it's fewer and fewer, it feels like, these days. But we're both recommending Jungle Cruise. Go check that out. The next movie we have on the marquee, sir, is a film that I don't know about you, but I've been really looking forward to. It is the newest film from A24, which means it's going to be great. But it is from
A24 is the
gold standard
film studio that came out of nowhere, and I know it appeals. A24 appeals to a certain demographic. It appeals to the film snobs out there.
It appeals to those who like original ideas.
Yeah, and because you see the A24 logo on a film, you're going into something that is going to be different, that's going to be unique. It's going to have an eye behind it that takes the artfulness of film to another level. And if that's not your thing, well, then when you see A24 pop up on the screen, that movie's not for you.
And you're probably not getting a lot of sequels out of A24s.
No, hopefully not. So when you asked me if I wanted to come back on and review some movies, I chose this weekend because of this movie.
Yeah. So we're talking about The Green Knight from director David Lowery, who did a previous A24 movie, Ghost Story. This is the story. It's based on the 14th century Arthurian tale of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Gawain is played by Dev Patel. We are in Arthurian times. An older King Arthur is holding court on Christmas Day when the titular Green Knight enters his court with an offer and a challenge to all who reside, that he will allow anyone to strike a blow against him, but in return, he will return the same blow to them in 1 year's time. This is when Gawain, who is Arthur's nephew, he's a young man kind of living in the shadow of all these legendary knights around Arthur's castle. He laments not having any legendary tales of his own or adventures of his own. So he steps up and he beheads the Green Knight with one swift blow, setting the course for his unavoidable fate in 1 year's time. And he's a guy who he was impetuous. He saw only the honor and the legend that he would gain from the knights around him, but not the fate that this would end up bringing him. And the movie then kind of focuses on 1 year later, he's taking this 6-day journey to meet the Green Knight. and it's the tale that he goes on. He's joined by a fox that joins him for part of the journey. He runs into thieves and giants and a couple who takes him in overnight, and all of these events offer different questions. Specifically, when he runs into this couple played by Alicia Vikander and Joel Edgerton, they take him in, and a lot of this movie, but specifically that, kind of a lot of reality starts to blur at points, and there's a lot of challenging riddles, and this journey that he takes is never straightforward. It has lots of twists and turns, and he's Dev Patel is a guy who's feeling inadequate amongst his legends, and he's trying to put on a brave front. And when he's forced to kind of look within himself on this journey, he doesn't necessarily like what he sees when he's faced with these real challenges. And it's a really interesting movie to me. It is David Lowery will never hold your hand through one of his movies. Ghost Story was very much the same. It was not a ghost story like people were expecting. I remember seeing that in theater and people were like, well, that was boring. Like, well, because it wasn't there was no jump scares. This movie,
it wasn't a horror movie,
right? Yeah, it was very introspective. This is very much an Arthurian morality tale rather than a big adventure. If you're expecting big, King Arthur swords and shields, this is not what this is. It's much more a film about this man on this journey and facing his morality. And there's lots of dreamlike sequences in here where a lot of it I really struggled to discern if what I was seeing was a hallucination, a dream, a reality, what was going on. And I was left with a ton of questions after this. And I love when I'm left with questions after a movie, because this is one of those movies for me that demands a rewatch. I was trying to get a rewatch in before this taping. I couldn't get a second viewing in, but I'm going this week because I have to. I have to clear some things up in my head with this.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this flick. Again, I chose to come on this week because this film was coming out. Me and you have been talking about this movie for quite a while because it looks so interesting. I like Dev Patel. I thought he's great casting for this. Everything we had seen up until the release of the movie was very vague and stylistic, and I didn't know what to expect going in. What we got was this, as you said, a thinking man's Arthurian legend film, where he goes on this quest, and at each turn he is faced with a crazy task to do. And honestly, the guy we meet at the beginning of the movie, we're like, he's gonna fail. Like, he already failed the first test when he faced the Green Knight originally. He's going on this quest, and every time he gets faced with another task or a question, you're expecting him to fail. And it's all weird, realistic, grimy, fantasy based. Like, there's no one thing you can place on this movie, because as realistic as it sets out to be, there's also a fox that helps him. There's also giants, there's also ghosts, there's also the Green Knight himself, who is a mythological
and
kind
he
of
looks
creature
and sounds remarkable too. I love that Green Knight.
And I also agree. This is a movie you probably need to watch one or two times, not because it's confusing, but because you're going to miss something the first time. You're going to want to pay a little bit more attention the next time, because the first time you go, you don't really know what you're getting yourself into. Now I know, and now I want to go on that journey again.
Yeah. I find that this movie, much like with Ghost Story, I have found that this is a real love or hate film, depending on what you're going in with and what you're expecting to come out with. I know when I walked out of the theater, it was very split, and it was no in between really for most of the people that were in the theater with me. It was love or hate. What did you end up giving the Green Knight?
I gave it 4.5. I think the only thing that counted against it is something I can't even remember. So maybe it's a 5.
For me, it was I felt like it was a little lengthy in parts. It kind of dragged in the middle. There was a point of his journey where he's riding his horse. It felt like we were making this journey in real time with him.
Yeah.
That was my one issue with it. But
Yeah, I probably would have that same thing. It was probably some things could have been cut a little tighter, but ultimately it's such a beautiful movie, and it's a fun adventure you go on, as crazy as it is.
And I end up I'm giving it 4 out of 5 stars right now, a very strong score. And that may move with a second viewing, right? I'm still not completely set in my head where I am with this, but
and that's fine.
Yeah,
sometimes you need a
exciting.
Jungle Cruise that's going to give you exactly what you want first go, and sometimes you want a movie that you're going to be thinking about for a few days afterwards.
Challenged. Yeah, absolutely. All right, sir. We have a few minutes left. Let's roll into our movie throwback for this week. You chose a film that's very fitting for this week. What are we talking about?
I did. We don't have to spend a whole lot of time on this one, but because of Jungle Cruise, we decided to revisit the film The African Queen for a couple reasons. One, the Jungle Cruise ride was based off of this film. It was one of Walt Disney's favorite films, and he wanted to bring the magic of traveling the river and seeing the animals to the people of California when he was building Disneyland, and so he made the Jungle Cruise for that experience. And the film does take some cues from The African Queen in terms of the characters in the styles that they wear.
Yeah.
And there you can see it when you watch it, that there's those hints. You could see where Walt Disney plucked ideas and themes
very
from that
purposeful
movie.
things. Yeah.
And it's a movie I hadn't seen in a very long time. And because we were doing Jungle Cruise, I really wanted to revisit it. It's available on Amazon Prime if you have Amazon Prime, so it's available streaming. And it's got Humphrey Bogart. It's got adventure. It's got Germans. You got Katharine Hepburn, who just kills it in this film. It's just a good time, man. And it's an adventure as well. I think the only thing that was a little rough watching it is I think the music for the movie, it felt like they didn't know what the tone of the scene was when they were writing the music, because there's just scenes where like Katharine Hepburn's gonna like walk from one end of the boat to the other, and she's just gonna look around, and like the music sounds like Godzilla is about to pounce on top of her. Like I'm gearing up for like what's about to happen, or like, is the Germans going to show up now and just murder them all? And it's like, oh no, she's just looking at the sun. It's fine.
Yeah.
But the music's just off on its own crazy adventure.
They're so great together. This was the one movie that Bogey won an Academy Award for.
Yeah.
Kind of a Lifetime Achievement Award, I think, but one of his few color films really towards the end of his career. But you can feel the humidity and the sweat on his brow in this movie.
Filmed in Africa.
Yeah. And there's legendary, if you want to have some fun, read some of the legendary tales of the production of this film. It was brutal. Humphrey Bogart was one of the few on the cast and crew to survive without horrific dysentery because he chose to not drink water. He only drank whiskey. That's how you survive.
There you go.
But African Queen, it's a classic that everyone has to see for sure. So
absolutely.
Let's take a look ahead at what is coming out the weekend of August 13th. We've got a few films. First up is going to be a horror film, a sequel. Don't Breathe 2 is coming to theaters near you.
I bet y'all don't even remember Don't Breathe 1.
Oh boy, barely. And then a biopic of Aretha Franklin, Respect, with Jennifer Hudson in the titular role. That'll be coming to theaters. And then a film that I first saw a trailer for 2 Super Bowls ago. Free Guy, Ryan Reynolds' new movie, is finally coming into theaters.
I really want to watch this movie, guys.
Man, have I seen this trailer a bajillion times, and I'm glad it's finally coming to us. And then over on Netflix, we have a political thriller called Beckett that is starring John David Washington and Alicia Vikander. I'm very excited for that. Those are the films that are coming out August 13th. Before we go any further, though, we have to thank our sponsor, Marcus Theaters, the Palace here in Sun Prairie. Thank you for sponsoring this program and your continued support. We always do appreciate that and encourage you, if you have a dream lounger near you, go sit in one because they're great. Great way to watch a movie. Next week, sir, I'm going to be talking about movies like The Suicide Squad, Vivo, that's Lin-Manuel Miranda's new animated film, the Val Kilmer documentary Val, and I'm gonna have a special guest who has not been on the show before. Very excited for all of that. That'll all be happening next week. Sir, thank you again for joining me. It's always a pleasure to have you on this with me. It's awesome.
Anytime.
Oh, I like that. That's what I like to hear. Good. Well, we'll be seeing you again very shortly. No doubt about it. But until next week, I'm Jameson.
I'm Jason.
Thanks for watching.